Okay, so Greece has been going on for so long. It is like a drama, a tragedy. How can you describe it even? And today there's news that the government plan, the austerity plan, was soundly rejected by the Eurozone countries, and they need to find like some more money to cut, another $500 million to cut from their budget. So obviously they are in a spot, and essentially the goal, under the best scenario, the goal is to reduce the debt in Greece by 2020 to 120% of their GDP. What do you think the probability that that's going to happen is? In my opinion, very low. Just consistently missing targets. And I guess what we need to do is to figure out what course to take, because I've been trying this negotiation, this private sector sharing in terms of writing down some of the debt. And I guess the way I look at it is there are basically 4 different things that you can do. So number 1 is being tried right now, and that's austerity. And there's only so much that you can actually do before a revolution. Number 2, you can just bail them out. So that is not really going to solve the problem, because even if you bail them out, they've still got this big imbalance where they're spending more than is coming in. So you're just going to get to the same situation again. So you don't fix anything. Number 3, you default. So that solves the debt to GDP problem pretty quickly. The problem is not the debt to GDP problem, but 2 other things. First, the imbalance you don't get rid of, because they're still spending more and they've got obligations into the future. So even if you wipe out all their debt, it solves some immediate problems, but it doesn't solve the longer term imbalance problem. And number 4 is simply to monetize. So just print the money to buy the debt and retire it. And again, that doesn't really solve the fundamental problem either, and it's actually fairly difficult to do, because the ECB, the rules of the ECB is that they cannot go and buy sovereign debt directly from any government. They have to do it indirectly. So they can go in the secondary market and buy this debt. They can pull a trick, like maybe we could talk about later, with the so-called LTRO, where you lend money so that other people can buy the debt. So you put all these together. Ideally, there will be a 5th option, which is devaluation. And that's what's happened in the past. Country gets into trouble, you devalue. And it's actually so much politically easier to do, because to go and cut somebody's wage by 1/3 is really tough to do. But to go in and devalue your currency by 1/3 doesn't seem as painful. Everybody's treated essentially equally. And it's just, unfortunately, not on the table right now. I am very much a believer to basically resolve the uncertainty. It's probably best. It is so unlikely that even with a revised plan that they're going to hit their targets, that it's probably best that they default. And the money that's being spent, instead of 130 billion euros to effectively bail out Greece, why not use that 130 billion euros to shore up the financial institutions in Europe that would be negatively affected by the default in Greece. With the default, they would probably leave the Eurozone. And again, I think that that's not necessarily a bad thing. It allows them to revalue their currency and not have to go through the same sort of austerity things directly. So politically, it's a lot easier to do. And it would give them much more flexibility, I think. They had the benefit of the euro for quite a while, and it definitely led to overinvestment, as we've seen, and programs that are unrealistic. The other benefit is not to Greece directly, but it's to the other countries, because it would be the poster child of what happens if you really go offside. You're gone. Okay, so right now, there's no real penalty. So if we had an example of what happens if you go offside, I think the chance of the other countries having, for the Eurozone to be viable going forward actually increases. And yes, you need to worry about contagion. And it might not just be Greece, it could be Portugal also. Going beyond those two countries, I'm not so sure. So I think that use the 130, use the emergency fund basically to shore up the financial institutions, make a decision on Portugal sooner rather than later. Like, there's no sense in drawing this out for years. Again, the uncertainty doesn't help anybody. Uncertainty works against growth. We need growth. People say, well, austerity is killing GDP growth. Well, yeah, mechanically, because government spending is in GDP. So you reduce government spending, so therefore you reduce GDP. But so what? Do you want an economy that's 60% government spending? Is that the sort of economy that will give you growth opportunities in the future? Probably not. So this GDP stuff, I think is, a lot of it is just very, very mechanical. So I think we need to figure out what we want and to do it decisively, and that would resolve a lot of uncertainty. So again, people saying austerity means reduced GDP growth, and I'm coming at it from a slightly different angle. I'm saying your investment's being destroyed by the uncertainty that this whole process is creating. Uncertainty just increases risk. You increase risk, it increases the cost of capital, and people are just not going to invest. And then somebody might say, well, gee, interest rates are really low. Well, that depends where you are, number one. Yes, in Germany, that's true. In these other countries, it's not true. And the other thing is, the uncertainty affects the risk premium. So the risk premium is really important. So what is the cost of capital for an investment project? Right now, it's very high because of the uncertainty in Europe. So want to develop a plan that is decisive, that considers various different contingencies, that is proactive towards supporting the healthy financial institutions in Europe. And I emphasize healthy because I do think that a good plan would restructure some of the banks in Europe, and then go forward that way. We've had this long, drawn-out process that's really benefiting very few right now, other than the lawyers and bureaucrats, some of whom have been hired to do this job. I think we need a different strategy. It's time to consider, at least, a different strategy.